All right, we're going to get started here. So welcome everyone for joining us for this panel discussion. My name is Taj Smith. I will be serving as the moderator for today's panel. A little context on why we have this panel, and then I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly. One of the reasons we decided to put together this panel, besides we have some wonderful people who have decided to join and share their thoughts, um, is particularly as a fairly new resident to Rochester. I've only lived here about a year and a half, and one of the things I've noticed is that there's not enough cross-community dialogue. And we tend to kind of exist in our silos in our own neighborhoods or parts of the city. And I really wanted an opportunity to kind of challenge that and bring folks together who are doing fabulous work in their areas to tell you about that, but also to meet each other. And hopefully that will inspire the rest of you to sort of follow suit, once this summit is over today. So we'll have the panelists.
There's been like, this has been going on all day. This is just the one session I've signed up for.
So Matt, remind people if you please have your microphone on mute so that we don't catch any background noise. We're gonna have the panelists sort of share for about 25, 30 minutes ideally, and then try to leave about 10 minutes or so for your questions, which I'm sure you'll have plenty. Please leave your questions in the chat box area. And I will try to monitor those as they go through. If I happen to miss it and you want to vocally share your question, you can do that as well. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves briefly, sharing their name and what neighborhood they are representing. All right. And let's start with Marvin. All right. We'll see see if Marvin's having any technical difficulties. We'll move on to Sherry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry Jackson, and I moved upstate from New York City more than 25 years ago. While I currently live in the Webster area, having previously resided in Macedon, Farmington, and Pittsford, I care about all of Rochester and its surrounding communities. So I feel like I'm representing everyone.
Very good. We'll go Gwen.
Here.
Can't hear you, Gwen.
Hi, I'm Gwen Clifton. I'm a proud resident of Chilli, town of Chilli. I've been living here for about 4 years now. And I'm a social worker. I am one of the co-founders of West Side Inclusion Initiative, which is a grassroots community effort to promote diversity and equity and inclusion in our suburban West Side community. I also serve as the rights advocate, advocating for people with developmental disabilities across the 10-county region. I'm trying to, it won't stop. Oh my God. I'm so sorry. I thought I turned it all off. And I'm here to help, and I want to see a better life for my children and for all of our children when it comes to diversity and racism. Make a long story short.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's go to Lindsay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lindsay Swanson. Really thankful for the opportunity to be here. Today, we'll be talking a little bit more about the Rochester Anti-Racism Action Coalition. I live in the city of Rochester, but I've gotten involved with a few other co-founders of this organization, which largely is focusing on the suburbs of the city, mostly suburbs in sort of the Pittsford, Brighton, Penfield area.
Thank you. Shawna.
Hey, thanks, Taj. My name is Shawna Lusk. I'm very honored to be a part of this conversation. I represent Chilli as well. I, along with Marvin and Gwen, are the three co-founders of the Westside Inclusion Initiative. I've also recently been named a member of the working group for the the commission, the RAISE Commission, the working group for mental health and addiction. So I'm not only trying to be connected in my community where I've lived for 13 years, but also to connect to our brothers and sisters in the city of Rochester.
Thank you, Shawna. All right, looks like Marvin, can you hear me now? No. Sorry, just having a chat conversation with Marvin. Oh, I think you're unmuted. All right. I'm going to continue on while Marvin continues to work on it. It's having problems.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Got it up now.
There you go.
And a reset. Sorry.
All right. So please introduce yourself and let us know what area of Rochester you are representing today. Did you get that, Marvin?
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were talking to me.
Yes.
I'm looking at all these pages. Okay. So first, my name is Marvin Stepherson, and I'm representing Chilli, New York.
All right. Thank you. All right. So my first question for you all is, what role have you played in moving your community to be anti-racist or anti-hate? And we don't have to go in a particular order, wherever it feels called.
I'll go. So growing up in an interracial family, my late father being Black and my white mother, initially in the South and then later in the Midwest, I had to quickly learn to discern and navigate racist attitudes and behavior, because at times it was simply a matter of survival. My parents instilled in me the importance of standing up for racial equity and justice, even if that meant standing alone. When I watched the video of George Floyd's murder, something in me shifted in a way that hadn't before. Even though I've spent my entire life calling out racism, whether it was in school or work or even within my own family, I felt I needed to do more. I also recognized the amount of white people and family members, white friends of mine, publicly denouncing racism, something that I had never seen before. And I wanted to harness and leverage the momentum that I was feeling and seeing. I had white friends and family members calling me, texting me, asking for help, saying, I'm ready to speak up, I'm ready to use my privilege. How do I confront the racists within my own family without burning down my house? Essentially permanently severing familial ties. And I was reading the book, White Fragility, and Robin DiAngelo wrote, the status quo in the US is racism. And it's comfortable for her as a white person to live in a racist society. So given my own life experience, I wanted to help white people move their own needles from being comfortable and quietly non-racist to being uncomfortable and vocally anti-racist, and go from being actors to full-on allies and accomplices. So I reached out to one of the biggest and best change agents I know in this area, Kevin Beckford, who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner, as well as he sits on the board, the town board for Pittsford. And Kevin mirrored my exact feelings. And so he introduced me to his like-minded friends, Lindsay Swanson, who is also on this panel, as well as Dan Keating, who is a senior lecturer at the Simon Business School and also a Pittsford Village Board trustee. And the Rochester Anti-Racism Action Coalition was born in late May. So our mission is to partner with like-minded organizations and individuals to dismantle systemic racism through education, advocacy, and community organizing. So that's why I'm here, Taj.
All right, that's great. All right, others on the panel, what role have you played?
Okay, so everybody's shy. Gosh, where do I start? Let's see. Going into law enforcement in 1989 and working in the community that I grew up in, I was the founding president of our Minority Policemen's Association. Again, trying to overcome the historical construct of slave patrol and what it means to the Black and brown communities from its existence here in the U.S. until the present day. We always talk about hiring diversity that will overcome the policies and the culture, but we know that that's not the case as we looked across the country as well as locally. And we've seen, Black leadership, but still the culture still exists. And so in joining the police department and joining and creating that association, we sought to tackle the policies and the culture that creates the perspective of the community that we serve, Black and white alike. And it was about education in the community, how law enforcement is supposed to be functioning inside the community, but also how the community is supposed to view and function with the community residents and leaders. And a lot of times we don't see that cultural understanding or competency because we don't teach it in the higher ed and the educational system. And then certainly in the family construct, if you don't have any exposure to another culture, how can you teach them how to interact with the other cultures? So I did, that through my presidency, but also I did a lot of volunteer work as a football coach, as a mentor at the Urban League. Gwen and myself here in Chilli and Shawna put on a anti-racism rally to help bring awareness into our community where we currently live. I served on the Gates Chilli School Board for 3 years, where I pushed for not only culturally relevant pedagogy for the students, but also the hiring of teachers and administrators. Because as an adjunct professor and one who also worked in the city school district, I know how important it is to have a teacher of color in front of not only the Black students, but the white students, so that we can socialize ourselves on leadership, on interacting with one another, and understanding how we are to speak to and with one another. And often we find ourselves not being able to communicate because we fear that we're going to say something that's inappropriate, because we haven't learned how to socially interact with one another from a young age, and certainly in our teenage years when we're finding our identity, and then into our our higher ed and adult life, in the workplace. I often, and I'll finish with this, I often talk with friends who are like myself, dog lover and owner, and I say we spend a lot of time and money taking our pets to the teacher, instructor to socialize the dog at parks and instruction, because we want proper interaction with family members, guests, and in the home. But we don't put any type of social structure in our school system to teach our kids conflict resolution and how to interact with one another and resolve conflict and perceptions in a more appropriate manner, so that carries through life, and find ourselves that it's all right to disagree and be disagreeable without being violent or being negative. And so that is what I've done and continue to do in our community.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My journey began growing up. I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood over J Street area. My neighborhood had Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, every walk of life. I grew up very diverse. We interact with one another. We didn't live in silos. We were at one another's homes. However, as I grew up, I saw a change in my neighborhood. As I grew up, my friends began to move out of my neighborhood and move into the suburbs, and my family ended up staying. Through that, I noticed the crack pandemic. And how it affected my neighborhood and how it changed the people. And I watched my family, my parents, take in those kids whose parents left them off because they became drug addicts and all sorts of things. And now I at the time, I used to look at that and like, wow, why can't we move out? Because my parents made decent money. My mother worked at Ragu Foods. My father worked at Gerber. We made good money, but my parents refused to move. And now when I look back and I look at things right now, I'm glad they didn't move, because those opportunities and those life lessons helped me to be a person that can advocate about diversity, help me to my knowledge of different cultures and different things like that, and to help people to have those type of difficult conversations can happen because I had those experiences. Now, as the West Side Initiative, Inclusion Initiative, I took the lead on the West Side Rally to End Racism. I wanted to do something in our neighborhood because living in the suburbs, coming from the city to the suburbs, is two different worlds. And they're very much isolated, but two different functions. And I noticed being a Chilli resident, I was like, wow, I live in a bubble. I mean, my home has become a resort compared to the way I grew up and where I lived as I raised my family. But I realized we need to have these conversations because the people that live out in the suburbs are your teachers, your nurses, your administrators. They are the people who service the children that lives in the inner city. And we need to have that crucial conversation about racism, because people come into the school systems. When I went for my master's, I did my internship at a city school. And I saw the attitudes that some of the teachers had towards these kids, towards their students. So my thought and process is that we need to bring positive conversation around racism, one that we can talk openly, make corrections where it need to be in a friendly manner, but yet continue to restore and rebuild. And that was my whole attitude towards having this West Side rally, and talk about how racism affect our community, not only just Black people, but it affects the whole gamut. And so this rally touched education, policy, corporate America. We hit many different avenues of how racism affect America. And so it was a positive thing. People came together and it brought awareness to racism.
Thank you. Lindsay or Shawna?
I can jump in here. Sherry did an excellent job of really describing the mission of the Rochester Anti-Racism Action Coalition. I think for me personally, when I think about my role, Kevin reached out to me, I think it was the day after all of the news about George Floyd came out, and said, I need your help and I want to get this organization started. And I think my initial thought was, well, as a white lady, I don't really know if I feel comfortable leading the charge here. That I think that, how can I be supportive, but I don't really know if I want to call myself a co-founder of this organization. And what really is my role? Like, I'm not necessarily going to share or be able to explain exactly how racism has impacted my life in the same way that perhaps Kevin or Sherry could. And so I really tried to figure out what could I do to support the initiative, because it is crucial and we do need all hands on deck, but also not fall into perpetuating systems of oppression that have put us in this place in the first place. And so I think one thing that I've really sought to do over the past few months is figure out what tools do I have that can be of assistance, and how do I put those tools into play under the guidance of the people who need to be really guiding us in the right direction with the movement. And so for me, really my nerdy side has come out. It's been about providing technical support. It's been about providing Zoom links and running chat features and really figuring out how to operationalize a larger movement and provide the platforms to make that happen. And it's been really a huge learning experience for me to think about, how do I step out of the limelight? I think in other work that I've done in the past, I have considered myself to be a strong leader and have often took the helm. And in this work, it's really been about, how do I take a step back from that and provide a pathway for other people to take the steering wheel, and how can I be as a supportive person in that process? So it's really been a huge learning experience for me, and also an incredible opportunity to work side by side and partner with incredible leaders like Dan, Sherry, and Kevin.
Thank you.
I would close out by saying I can identify fully with Lindsay. I'm a white woman from Wisconsin, and I never realized growing up there that Wisconsin is one of the most racially divided states in the country. And the longer I'm gone, the more I see how my privilege took me to many different places. But now that I'm here, I have a responsibility to do something with the knowledge that I've gained. I became really involved in this conversation on the West Side when I met Gwen and Marvin, who were both running for political office in Chilli and in this side of the county. And I realized more and more as I started to try to help them with their campaigns, there's no representation of any kind, of any Black or brown folks in particular, but we don't have really any GLBTQ folks. We have very little religious diversity. So in this kind of conversation that's happening now in Chilli, we're really looking for ways to attract and make this a vibrant community where everyone feels welcome and not just feels, but knows that they have a valuable part of the conversation to offer.
Thank you. Thank you all. So the next set of questions I'm going to ask, of course, for time purposes, probably just 2 or 3 of you to respond to. But one of the reasons I wanted to ask that previous question is to show that all of us have different roles to play. Not everybody needs to be at the front. You know, we need people on the side, the other side, back, underneath, over the top, all directions. We really need people to play a role. So, hopefully that's something you all who are listening or participating can take away. So this next question is, what successes have you seen since you've gotten involved in your community to address hate, to address racism? What signs of success have you noted?
I would say that one huge success that we had is that our town supervisor did a proclamation against racism in our town that now hangs in town hall. We all have a copy of it. And I think that that the certificate itself is tangible success. It exists. It's something we can touch and see. But the bigger conversation around the fact that he has declared that we won't tolerate that kind of behavior in Chilli gives us a starting point. It really gives us a baseline. Certainly, it's not something that everyone, we know that some of our neighbors really could care less that there's a proclamation, probably don't even know. But that gives us latitude and some leverage and a good place to start. So I would call that a pretty huge success.
Yeah, and also piggyback off of Shawna, I'm hearing nothing but good conversation from our community. Our library has ordered books, more diverse books to put in the library. I think that's a huge step. Voting registration has, actually the League of Women Voters will be there, I think, this month. And people are talking and they're self-correcting, which is a wonderful start. We have a lot of more work to do, but it's a wonderful start. And like Shawna said, that tangible paper, that was a big deal in the town of Chilli, because Chilli has a reputation of being conservative, very conservative, which I find that as a way to push other people out and not let people in when we use that word. Because Chilli is very diverse, more than what people give acknowledgement of. Very diverse. And Marvin and I and Shawna know this because we were knocking at doors and was able to meet and greet some of the residents in Chilli as Marvin and I ran for office. I was shocked myself. So it's a start. We're starting. We're not a Brighton yet. We're not a Pittsford yet, but we're going to get there because Shawna, myself, and Marvin, we're going to keep on knocking until we make change.
Thank you. Let's hear from Pittsford side or another neighborhood.
I will say I think within 2 weeks of our coalition being founded, Dan Keating and Kevin Beckford, our other co-founders, put together a march in Pittsford. It was held on, I believe, June 13th. We were just in our infancy. We're still in our infancy stages, but really new. And to pull together a march in one of Rochester's most segregated towns, I think was monumental. Hundreds and hundreds of people attended this march. I was there, I helped kick it off, and it was just breathtaking to hear from not only, you had educators there, and professionals spoke out, clergy spoke out, but you got to hear from students who attended the schools there. It was just a really beautiful day. We've had people donate their artwork to help us create lawn signs. We've sold over 200 lawn signs across the area that say Black Lives Matter or hate doesn't live here. And for some people might feel like this is a performative action to have a lawn sign in your yard, but it's a start. And not even a week ago, I had a young man who was picking up our waste removal, and he thanked me for having the Black Lives Matter sign in my yard. And I said, of course, it's the absolute very least I could do. And he said, it makes me feel safe, that if something were to happen to me out here, I could come to your house and it's a safe space. So for those of you who have lawn signs, they mean a lot to people, whether you realize it or not. Our coalition has hosted 7 calls. We like to call them a brave space where we have uncomfortable conversations. I believe uncomfortable conversations save lives, so it gives people a chance to come together. I think our initial call was really just to talk about our despair and anger and frustration over George Floyd's death. It gave us all a reason to come together and just talk about that. But since then, we've hosted calls on the history of systemic racism in Rochester. Shane Wiegand was one of our guest speakers, and he talked about that. He gave a great presentation. If you haven't heard his presentation called Rochester Segregated by Design, I would really check it out. We also hosted a call with Chief LaRon Singletary and Sheriff Todd Baxter before any of us knew about what happened to Daniel Prude. That took place. And then more recently, we had a call just last week with our coalition members to discuss Rochester's current climate and the death of Daniel Prude. And next week, we are hosting a sold-out workshop. It's a virtual theater workshop called Uncomfortable Conversations, Preventing or Confronting Privilege, Bias, and Racism. And so we have Impact Interactive hosting that with us. And their actors will be acting out several scenes and really teaching people how to confront racism at work and in their own lives. And so I'm very, very proud of, even though we're a young coalition, we've hit the ground running, and we have a lot more work to do in terms of affecting policy changes and police accountability, but we are building a community, and I think we're having conversations that need to be had, and we're at the very, very beginning stages of that, but I'm very excited about where we're going.
Thank you. So I've got one more question for the panelists, and then we're going to turn to the audience members' questions. Marvin, I'd love for you to start us off with this question. Where does your community that you live in, need to go from here? What are some other things that can be done or worked on?
Well, you know, looking at the community when we first moved into Chilli, the reason why we moved into Chilli when we moved from the city was because it was very diverse, as Gwen has recently spoke about through our campaign walk. And but still having more work, not only should it be diverse in the residency, but also in the business. And so I would say moving forward in Chilli to start to see more small or even commercial businesses that speak to cultural diversity. You know, if you're talking about restaurants, the diversity in foods, if it's shopping, the diversity in the product and the clothing or whatnot. So just, you know, if you really want to find yourself to be at home in a community, you need to see yourself there. And the only way you're going to see yourself there is if you have businesses that you can walk into that have things that are relative to your cultural upbringing, be it religious, ethnic, and so that's some things that I would suggest moving forward and for our community.
Thank you. Anybody else want to tackle that question?
I think for our community, really, we've just started with the tip of the iceberg. We have conversations going. As Gwen mentioned, folks are talking, which is such an important place to start. But I think we also need to recognize that it is just the start within at least the communities that we're working in, more Pittsford, Penfield, Brighton, et cetera. I think folks who have not considered a role of racism before are now starting to consider the role that that's played, both impacting their lives and the lives of people they love, the lives of people that they don't know as well. But now it's about putting momentum and action behind all of these feelings that people are starting to recognize. And so finding ways to provide more opportunity for systemic change, potentially even starting with who folks are voting for in a month and a half here, right? Thinking about the action, I think, is where we're going to see the movement continue to build momentum. And then I think for us as an organization, one of the things that we're thinking a lot about is what Taj mentioned at the beginning of this panel. How do we make sure that we're aligning with like-minded organizations so that we can add power and support behind the work that's being done in other spaces as well? We have felt really fortunate to get a ton of interest and many people on an email list. How do we start directing that attention to the work that's being done in other places as well? Because that collective impact is going to be so much more great than just keeping the focus on the work that we're doing as an organization.
Thank you, Lindsay, for that. And that actually quickly jumps right into one of the questions, and I'm gonna not ask them in order just because it flows nicely. So someone had asked, well, how do they get involved? You know, how could they get involved in the organizations or opportunities that all of you have in your local areas?
I'm going to jump in with a really brief answer, and this is not meant to be flippant at all, but I would say show up. I think that there's lots and lots of work being done in different places. If you do a search on Facebook events to see what are the upcoming events, just show up. You don't have to be invited to walk in the door for most of these events. Most are being held virtual. And so listening into a call to hear more about what's happening in that space is typically an open door policy with most organizations that are doing anti-racist work right now. So do that Facebook search. Find the Zoom link, jump into a call, and then see where you fit in the work that's being done.
I can piggyback on Lindsay. I would say if you can't find one, create one. Often we sit back and wait, you know, we're really reactive, you know, who's going to create this? Who's going to take that first step? You know, if you see a need, you know, you fill that void. It's like see something, say something. We all know how racism began. We know how it continues to facilitate itself and operate in our neighborhoods and our community. So we have to be proactive across the board in order to tackle that need. And it's going to take many hands to this type of work. So if you don't see something there, create it. And like they say, if you create it, they will come.
Absolutely. I can piggyback off of that, what Marvin just said. With the West Side Inclusion Initiative, people, when it first started off as a book club, and then myself, Marvin, and Shawna and Pastor Cooper, we put on the West Side End Racism Rally. And I'm going to tell you, people came from all walks of life with all different types of backgrounds. I mean, even at the last hour of before the night before the rally, we were looking for an interpreter. And someone emailed Shawna and said, I will do it. I mean, from everything that we needed to make that rally a success, it came. We didn't have to beg. We didn't have to borrow. People were donating money. People donated money at the rally itself. How can I help? All it takes is one voice to step up and say, I'm here, I'm willing, and just wait. Because there's a lot of people that feel like you and I that's on the panel, and those of you that are watching. A lot of people feel the way we feel, whether you Black or white. You know, Black people are tired of racism. White people are tired of hearing about it, and Black people are tired of feeling it. So it's everybody tired of it because it's affecting everybody. And then we got this pandemic, COVID. Everybody is tired, and people want to see change. And I think right now is the right time. Strike it while it's hot. Do whatever you dream to do and get it started.
Thank you. So moving on to the next question is, how does the activism that takes place in the suburbs influence what's going on in the city? And I think this was Gwen who gave an example of this earlier, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
but, you know, from the teachers,
mm-hmm.
and the administrators who live in the suburbs, if they are having those conversations, hopefully they're able to bring that to their work. But are there any other concrete examples that anybody can give of, you know, how that relationship is important or why that relationship is important?
I think that sometimes.
Go ahead, Shawna. I'm talking a lot.
That's okay. I think sometimes, you know, activism starts, especially at a grassroots level, starts in your front yard, in your cul-de-sac, on your block, in your neighborhood. So for me, being able to be involved here, educated, I was able to educate myself a bit more about what was happening in the city, and understand that we can't survive if the city can't survive, and vice versa. The city can't survive without us, right? So we're all a part of this fight together, and that was part of what led me to get involved with the Raise Commission. Really, there are so many opportunities if someone will put out a call. If you raise your hand, you're going to get picked for 14 things. So it's real easy to bring what I can offer out here in Chilli and take it and apply it in different ways in the city of Rochester. Another thing that I recently was a part of the Leadership Rochester program, which I think there are probably lots of folks on the call who have participated or have knowledge of that program. I can't give it a high enough regard or recommendation. That was one way that a lot of people are able to take their energy and channel it into for the benefit of the city. We all did service projects and connected in different ways and through different networks. So I mean, it's kind of a long-winded answer. I'm not sure I really gave a concrete example. So I could have just really said nothing out loud. But in any case, I think that it's easy to start small and get bigger. And it's what I would totally recommend.
And Taj,
Mhm.
one of the things that came out in the rally when we talked about corporate America, what some of our boards look like. Are the boards diverse? You cannot talk about inclusion and diversity if the board of these companies, organizations are not diverse. You can't speak for the experience or for a whole group of people when you have no idea what those experiences are. And the only way that you're going to be able to say something and to do something on a positive note versus putting your foot in your mouth when you make the wrong decision or say the wrong thing because you don't have no one on the board that doesn't look like you or had or never had those type of experience, and now you're backpedaling because you don't have a sounding board. We got to change the boards of these businesses, agencies, organizations, companies. These boards have to be diverse. One of the things I brought up on one of the calls, I think Kevin invited me, I can't remember the name of the call that I was on. I asked a question about the fit with the police department. There's a group of social workers that come out with the police for mental health crisis. That committee, the fit, I think it's fit or sit. I'm not sure what the name of it is, but it should be diverse. When I asked the question, there's one person of color. Now, being a social worker, I know better than that because many people of color do not want to do counseling or any such thing because they feel judged. When you're trying to describe something of your experience and this person never had a clue, never experienced anything like that, people don't want to get the help that they need because they feel judged. They want to see somebody of color that looks like them, and maybe that person didn't experience, but it's not something they never heard of before. Not to say that a person who is not of color cannot help effectively. I'm not saying that at all. But we got to have people, we have to have diversity in everything that we do. And I think that's the way we can help. Those of you that's on this call, if you are in a leadership position, take a look at your company, take a look at your business and start involving people of color in your businesses.
Thank you. So we've got basically 2 minutes maybe. I want to ask this question, so I'm going to ask folks to really be brief in your remarks. But just to add on to what Gwen said, I would also add, think about economics when you're thinking about that too, because there are many boards that require $5,000, $10,000, to sit on the board. And when you talk about the intersection of race and economics, right, there's real inequities that exist there. So my last question, and then we'll finish, for the panelists is, what have you learned about yourself as you've taken these actions, right? What have you learned about yourself? And again, briefly, because we're almost at our time.
Individuals can make a big difference.
I'm sorry, Shawna, we keep stepping on each other.
I'm just gonna say, individuals can make a big difference. You don't have to come at it thinking I'm just one person. What can I do? You can do a lot. And one person adds to another person, adds to 2 more people, and suddenly you have 50. And so that's what I've learned about myself. I have a voice and I can make it loud and make a difference.
Marvin?
I would say, one, from the last question, many of the folk that live in the suburbs have family members that live in the city. So what you do in the suburbs often goes back into the city. And so that's that one connection. And what I learned from this is that I've been a lot more reflective of myself, how I am educated about my identity, and then how I educate my children and my community about our identity as African Americans.
Sherry?
I would say that even though I have so much to learn, my life experience, everything that I've been through up until now has prepared me for the work that I'm doing. So as hard as it was being raised in my family, living in the South and having to deal with the things that I did, has prepared me to buckle down and lean into this work and have these uncomfortable conversations and help people navigate their ways through it as well. And I agree with everything that you said, Shawna. One person meets another person, meets another person. We've watched our coalition expand in profound ways. And our community needs to heal. And the only way that's going to happen is if the city hears and meets many of the demands, the streets are speaking, and everybody needs to come together and listen and act accordingly. And so I'm glad that there are other coalitions and other groups, and I would love to see the Rochester Anti-Racism Action Coalition continue to grow and expand and meet with these other groups that are doing the same work that we are. It's the only way it's going to affect change.
Lindsay?
Thank you.
I think for me personally, in addition to what I mentioned previously about learning how to figure out what tools I can use to be supportive, it's also about not making perfection the enemy of progress. That there's a number of times before our calls start that I get the butterflies in my stomach thinking, I don't know how this is going to go. Should we really be doing this? And it's just about getting out there and beginning the work and letting it fall where it falls and learning as you go to continue to improve your work. So really jumping in head first and then growing from there.
All right, Gwen, bring us home.
You are the leader that you are looking for. Everybody can lead. Just get started. The people will come. We just need you to start. And that's what I learned. I am a leader.
Well said. All right, well, thank you to our panelists. Very appreciative of your wisdom, your insight, and thank you all for joining us for this session. And we look forward to seeing you in the near future. Take care.